everyone. How are you today? Thanks for choosing the best session of the day. I am so excited for this conversation. I feel very strongly about making cleared careers cool again. There are so many opportunities for talent in the national security community. So this could not be a more timely conversation. And I could not be more excited to have this conversation with two rock stars who are going to share unique perspectives on this topic. Felipe Millon and David Schiff, welcome. Let's call this the fireside chat. Let's just jump right in. I always like to start with, can you just share a little bit about your background, your journey, how you came to be excited about a career at the intersection of technology and national security? Felipe.
Sure. Well, thank you all for having me. So Felipe Millon, I'm currently at OpenAI. I lead our work in the federal civilian and state and local space. I was also the first government hire for OpenAI. So I got hired on to be the first person where OpenAI said, I think we might want to do something with the government directly. And so it was the first hire at OpenAI to focus on government go-to-market. My journey to working with the US government as a customer started very early after undergrad. So I studied industrial and systems engineering and got recruited to work at Lockheed Martin as an engineer. So I started my career off as an engineer for Lockheed Martin, working a bunch of different programs it was in the early days of the Iraq-Afghanistan war, so I did a lot of support on military operations on urban terrain training systems. So down in Orlando, Florida, at their simulation and training division. Moved up to the DC area, started working Navy programs, doing the sonar systems on submarines, and then worked some corporate engineering strategy and even a corporate VC fund that Lockheed had. So I did that for several years. Pivoted, did a little industrial, worked at an industrial supplier for a while, and then moved, I was moving around from DC to California, and then I moved back to Miami and got a job with Amazon. And that actually in the consumer side of Amazon, helping to launch Prime Now, their ultra-fast delivery business, which then merged with Amazon Fresh. I did that for a few years, and then I saw this AWS thing going crazy, and so I said, what is happening over there? And so I moved and transferred to AWS, to their public sector work, back here in the DC area. Did that for a few years, and then this ChatGPT thing came out. And I said, this thing is pretty cool. How does this work? And I started learning everything I could about AI and what was happening specifically in generative AI. Got fascinated about it, started pivoting my career to doing generative AI work within AWS, and then got a call from a friend in the industry that said, would you be interested in OpenAI? They're about to start a federal team and you'd be perfect for it. So that's kind of the path I've taken.
Awesome. David.
Thanks, Felipe. I've heard of ChatGPT. That's cool. David Schiff, I've been with the Navy most of my career since the early 2000s. I joined out of college through officer candidate school and was a supply officer. It's a logistician in the other branches of service. Served on the aircraft carrier Kitty Hawk out of Japan, and then on the submarine Nebraska out of Seattle. And I just, I was very inspired to serve. I heard Colin Powell and Robert Gates speak back in college, and I just wanted to serve. The clearance part, which we'll talk about today, was just part of service. I didn't think much about it back then. Obviously, as you move your way through the defense ecosystem, you realize later that that clearance matters a lot. It made me really glad that I kept my nose clean all those years in high school and college, and even in the Navy. And keeping a clearance is pretty important, and I think it's important for us today to, I think we're going to cover this, but helping a new generation understand the value of that, and maybe how that's changing over time. After I served 5 years, 7 deployments active duty, I ended up with the Navy as a civilian in acquisition for about 13 years. I was in the Littoral Combat Ship Program Office buying virtual and augmented reality trainers for the new ships. Those were based in San Diego and Mayport, Florida. And then that was really an interesting experience because VR and AR training was still pretty cutting edge back in the 2010 timeframe. So we had to get help, which was NOC TSD, one of the Navy's commands down in Orlando, where there's a lot of video game industry. So that was still pre-AI, but pretty cool to help the Navy figure out that space. I kind of got burned out on acquisition work for a little while, so I went to a fellowship where I had seen in the news something like Felipe said about OpenAI. I saw something called DIUX in the newspaper, and I was like, I want to do a rotation there. So I did, and I went to Silicon Valley. I got to see how they interface with startups and venture capital, and how they down select for what they eventually called the CSO and the other transaction authority that they kind of modified. That was a really great experience. I got a call about 6 or 7 months later from a mentor in the Pentagon who said, do you want to help kickstart the Navy's innovation cell, NavalX? So that we started in early 2019 under ASNRDA, the Secretary of the Navy for Research, Development, and Acquisition, Hondo Geurts. The concept was a little different from AFWorks, SoftWorks, and DIUX, which was a little more people, talent oriented, a little more workforce improvement, helping people understand whether they were in uniform or not. Like, what are the tools I'm going to need to look into? What are methods and capabilities I'm going to need in the next decade that will make me a better employee for the Navy and Marine Corps? So that's kind of what's taken me to where I am now.
That's awesome. And I love that you came to this intersection from a defense background and you got here through an industry background. And yet we're all here working on similar questions. And I think that gets right to the heart of the next question. I want to just level set really quickly. How many folks in here are familiar with DIU, AFWorks, SoftWorks? How many folks? So actually not many. Okay, that's good. This is really about the emergence of public-private partnerships as a way to drive defense innovation. And so maybe we could level set just a little bit, and maybe each of you could talk through your lens about the role that industry partnerships have in advancing national security missions.
Okay, sure. So I think that I'm kind of a rising tide floats all boats kind of guy in general, and I think that no one has all the answers for cutting edge tech at this point, meaning OpenAI is part of the solution, the Navy's acquisition apparatus, the Army's, the labs. These have to come together to really get us where we need to go. So I think that having a lot of new options for industry partnership, which the DoD has been working on for years, it's not just other transaction authority and SIBRs. It's hackathons, it's new kinds of prototyping, new test and evaluation opportunities that come more frequently and at less cost to industry. Because I know from having worked with AFWorks on a joint open topic on the SIBR front, and also at NavalX and Ensign, these are innovation groups in the DoD, we know how much industry has to spend to get to conferences and to test events. And I would say, and I'm guessing OpenAI feels this way too, is we need more opportunities to demonstrate what the technology can do and how our employees can use it, and not more opportunities to just show marketing materials.
So I'll answer the question in two parts. The first is I'm a huge fan of what the department has done with all these innovation groups. So specifically, I'll pick on DIU for a second, it's the one I'm closest to. There's been a traditional contracting mechanism on how you work with the US government and the very formal processes. The reality is that has evolved over time, and there's a very specialized industry of people who know how to work in there and the process, et cetera. There is a large startup ecosystem, for example, or non-traditional vendors that have some technology that they could bring to the department. And what I think through DIU and through other parts of what Air Force and Navy are doing, you see different non-traditional channels to bring that technology to the US government. And so DIU, for example, the Defense Innovation Unit, has these OTAs, these other transactional authorities, and ways to, again, all the acronyms, the CSOs, the commercial service openings of ways to say, how do I actually bring this technology in? And that has really now enabled, for example, a big defense tech ecosystem. Actually, interesting thing, I don't know if the industry is going to switch to war tech now that it's the Department of War. But now you're seeing this whole ecosystem around these startups that can bring value to the department. The other answer or perspective I'll give, and one of the reasons why that is so important, is in the world that I live in, breathe in, which is in artificial intelligence and AI, but you can use it with other industries as well, which is a lot of the innovation is now happening outside of the government, right? So there used to be a world, not too long ago, when the US government had a hand in funding the vast majority of fundamental research and things that were taking off, whether it was the internet through DARPA's investments or many other examples, or GPS satellites. a lot of it started within the government, so the government was very involved in its creation and its process, et cetera. That is starting to flip where you see industry leading so much more. And for example, in the development of artificial intelligence, is all happening at these labs like OpenAI and others, where we're doing the fundamental research and then the computing power to create. And so if you see, for example, just in computing power, the investments that are being made by industries, like companies like where I'm from and others, are the US government investment in those infrastructures dwarf in comparison to the investment in, for example, in GPUs and infrastructure that is happening in the private sphere and kind of in companies. So what we're seeing a lot is how does then the US government partner with industry to bring that technology in? How does the US government become a good customer and a good partner in order to create mechanisms so that the US government can take advantage of those? I think, getting to the point of ClearanceJobs, that I think creates an immense opportunity, especially for anyone looking for roles, because the US government does not have the skills it needs right now, specifically in artificial intelligence. That skill set does not exist in-house, and so they are finally looking for people and industry to support them with those missions. So I think this is such an early field, so if anyone's actively looking for opportunities, I cannot recommend more than go get deep in AI and then figure out how to bring that to the mission, especially in ways where you have cleared opportunities, and there is a subset of people who don't know. There's a smaller population who can work in these specific mission areas with importance. And so if you are within that smaller population, someone who knows how to work AI very, very well, you will have a leg up on getting those opportunities.
That's phenomenal, because I think there is this mindset that cleared careers are just government and some prime contractors and FFRDCs, and it kind of ends there. But now what we're seeing is this emergence of industry being a critical stakeholder in the national security community. And so it's not only about increasing capability for defense mission sets, but it's also about extensions to talent as a way to access that talent. And so I really think that it is so important to get a message out there for folks about, no, there's a lot more opportunity from having a clearance than just working in government or in the IC. And so I think it really is about raising that awareness. And let's get into the heart of it. How many people here are recruiters or like working? Okay, so let's zone into some career specific questions. Of course, we're talking about OpenAI and ChatGPT, and AI is transforming not only defense operations or warfighting operations, but the nature of work. And when we were prepping for this, you mentioned about a lot of opportunities that you see being created for folks, the emergence of new types of work and tasks in the defense ecosystem, and therefore in the cleared community. Can you, as AI adoption accelerates, can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different ways to tackle this. One thing I'll share is we just released a report 2 days ago, which summarizes how people are using ChatGPT. So we have a chief economist. It's actually a fascinating read if you're interested in this world. You can look up OpenAI's report on ChatGPT usage, and we basically looked at how the consumers, so mostly the consumer use versus the enterprise use, but how we're using ChatGPT. And it's fascinating because, so fun fact, 700 million people use ChatGPT on a weekly basis. That is 10% of the world's population that has used ChatGPT in the last 7 days. And the vast majority of those people use it multiple times a day. And so there is this massive change in the way that we're approaching work. And especially, so what's interesting in what's happening in the evolution of careers, and again, I think this is where it's creating a lot of opportunities for whether it be recruiting and building skill set and finding opportunities, is people's experience in their personal life is now, as a consumer, is now shaping their expectations of what things should be like within a work environment, whether that be in a government job, whether that be as a recruiter directly. But now that I know I can go use ChatGPT to go search, or I can ChatGPT to take a picture of my fridge and ask it for a recipe, or ask ChatGPT to help write a bedtime story for my kids and make it unique and teach them this specific lesson. Or plan my vacation to Japan and help me find best hotels and translate. So there's all sorts of use cases that you've seen that people are using ChatGPT for in a personal life. Maybe even ask it as a therapist and actually ask it questions to help advise you as a strategic planner. Now I'm thinking, well, I want to do that in my work life. Well, I have to write a strategic plan on how we should approach this market. Maybe I'm a recruiter and I have to think about what should my strategy be to find candidates and to find, jobs they're looking for. I can go run a deep research report on running these things. And so it's really the explosion of the consumer version of ChatGPT and other tools is really starting to shape what our expectations are as employees. The other thing I'll share, which is maybe more the heart of the question, is we do think that this changes the future of work. I'll address it right up front because it's a question I get asked a lot. A lot of people are like, well, is AI going to automate jobs, and what's it going to look like, and what does the future of work look like? I definitely don't have all the answers, but I'll share a perspective, which is I actually think thinking about how AI will automate jobs is the wrong perspective. AI is incredible in many, many ways, and it does some things that are absolutely superhuman. Just yesterday, for example, we announced that we won a gold medal in the coding competition, a collegiate coding competition, now by far surpassing most humans at these coding competitions, and we had a specific model that beat that. But there's other things these models do where they are not as good as humans and they fail very easily. And so there's this jagged frontier of capabilities. And so rather than thinking about job automation, what I prefer to flip the framing around is around task automation. So there are certain tasks I do in my job that now AI and ChatGPT can do way better than I can, right? So maybe it's doing web research, for example. That's a task that ChatGPT is now much, much better than I am at. If someone says, hey, here's a task, go research what the latest is on FedRAMP compliance and impact levels, et cetera, and I can just run a deep research report on that. And I can have the AI go do these deep searches for me and summarize that better than I probably could just with a Google search and kind of going back and forth. It'll do it much more efficient. It'll summarize it better. So it is way better at me than doing that. But that is what I do, even if given that task, is much more than just a search. I now have to maybe present that to my leadership. I have to use that to come up with a strategic plan on how do I want to approach an industry. I have to, convince leadership to trade off other priorities on why we should focus on accreditation and compliance of products. So I think about even in my job, there are certain tasks that ChatGPT will do and other AI models that it will do better than me. And so there's maybe task replacement. And the reality is some jobs are made up of more tasks that are replaceable. So some jobs are probably more at risk, and you're seeing labs talk more publicly because we also think we're on an exponential where these tools are just going to get better and better and better. And so, for example, coding is another one where people initially thought, what does the future of coding look like when these models can code? And some people have been giving advice of these models can code, you should not learn to code anymore, and being a coding is a bad idea because of the future of it. Actually, I very much disagree with that, and a lot of our founders and leaders disagree with that. And we say it's actually incredibly important still to learn to code. What coding looks like in just a couple years looks very different. What coding looks like today at a place like OpenAI is very different than what coding looked like 2 years ago. We're doing much more of working with AI. So we launched a product called Codex, and our engineers joke, my job is now more yelling at Codex and talking to Codex on what I want to build and having Codex do it, but my job is much more of the strategic planning and understanding and then figuring out how we approach these problems. So there is no doubt that these jobs will continue to evolve, and I think about that framing. So again, for advice that I would recommend to this audience, the number one thing you can do is be flexible, is learn to be flexible, learn to be the fastest one to adopt, and by far learn these tools. So again, you should absolutely learn to code, but the number one thing you should do is actually learn to code with AI.
There's so many questions I could ask from this. And Dave, there's a lot of implications here about skills demand and trying to then, what is that? And was for the department and times of getting the right talent. But just really quickly, how many of you are using AI tools in your job? How many of you were using them a year ago? How many of you have noticed that your job and how you spend your time has changed because of AI tool? How many of you would say for the better because you're able to interact more with candidates, right? So as you think about how these tools are transforming not only technical work, but non-technical work, there's this real inertia, I would say, within the national security community, especially within the walls of the Pentagon, for example, to understand how then what the implications are for the type of talent we need, and what the type of work this talent will be doing, technical and non-technical. I'd be really curious about what you think we should be doing as a community to start thinking about moving in a direction of, okay, we have transformation happening right before our eyes in terms of the nature of work. How can we make sure that we're setting for success and thinking about the right talent we need and making the right requirements for recruiters to help us?
Yeah, I think Felipe's last point on flexibility is going to be key, especially for college students and just post-grads. I think they're going to need to demonstrate maybe a broader range of skills, and the fact that they've, like everyone in this room, has tried Claude or tried ChatGPT or tried Perplexity and used those things for different purposes. I think that I actually loved what you said about tasks too. I think that fear and the lack of clear direction into the department should be replaced by, if the department can kind of speed up the access to these tools, then what we want people to do is a lot more experimentation. That's what Defense Innovation Unit and Ensign and NavalX, other things I've been part of, have really been trying to get people to take that DevOps mindset, right? That like rapid experimentation, the agility of, hey, this didn't work, we put it in front of real users, we need to try again. I think the DoD is going to be looking at, or Department of War now, is going to be looking at, can people pivot to do a job that is going to require what some people call human-machine teaming, or one of my colleagues at Evans calls organization machine teaming, which is, this is now going to, just like I said earlier, industry and the defense world are partnering a lot more and have to. I think that's going to be the case for these jobs. I think we're going to have to hope that someone can code some, and hope that someone knows these tools and how to prompt. Prompt engineering probably is not going to be the next major. I think it's going to be another task, right, that you have to be pretty good at. Guess what? If you, like me, have a language major, reading and writing are pretty key to prompt engineering, right? So it helps that I was a journalist once. It helps that I can ask these tools the right questions. It saves me time when I do use them. Now, I will say, and we'll talk about this a little more later, we've been trying to get more low barrier to entry access for sailors, guardians, soldiers, Marines, et cetera, to use the private sector tools. In the meantime, the public sector, the Defense Department at least, is trying to create its own. I would call them small language models, right? Because to get a large language model, you actually have to de-silo all the data, right? So I think that we really need to get that data into common places. Not just budget and logistics data, but all of it, operational, personnel, et cetera.
One comment I want to add, because we were talking a little bit about prompt engineering. I've started to really not like that terminology for a couple reasons. And the number one reason I'll give you is it's not approachable enough for the vast majority of people. I am an engineer, right? I studied engineering. I'm not practicing engineering as much these days. But a lot of times when I talk to people about engineering who maybe weren't in a technical field and didn't study that, it doesn't seem very approachable. It's like, oh, that's a lot of math, science. I'm not necessarily good at that. Prompting is an extremely important skill set. And I love the point you made about being a language major actually helps you with that. The key around prompting is all about giving context to these models. It's all about, how do you get information? These models are PhD level in some areas. Again, some areas not yet, but it's all about, it's a PhD level, but a PhD that knows nothing about you. It doesn't know who you are, doesn't know what your tasks are, doesn't know what you're trying to do, doesn't understand the type of output you want. So prompting is all about giving this model context on who you are. Some of that's done in the tools, right? In ChatGPT, we have a feature called Memory now, which improves a lot and is one of my favorite features of ChatGPT. But really, it's about how do you give these models context. So I'll give you kind of 2 quick pro tips that are my favorite things to give to audiences on how to use ChatGPT. The number one is I use voice and dictation much more than I ever type to ChatGPT. So I use voice mode all the time. If you go in ChatGPT on the mobile web or on your phone, there's a voice mode button all the way on the right. And then right next to it, there's a little mic, and the mic is the dictation feature. I just use the dictation more than anything. I click dictation, and then for like 5 minutes, I'll just talk to the model. And then at the end, use that as the context to ask it questions, et cetera. So again, pro tip is talk to these models is one of the best tips I can give you. The other quick tip I'll give, just since I'm on this little rant, is about another tip called meta prompting. So there's something else that you can do, which is you can ask ChatGPT or another AI model how to ask ChatGPT something. So rather than, for example, I'll give you a silly example. I did a fantasy football draft 2 weeks ago, and I wanted to use ChatGPT to help me do research on players and for my specific league and our rule format and who I should take, my draft positions, etc. And so I could easily go to ChatGPT and say, hey, tell me who I should draft in XYZ, etc. But instead what I wanted to do, I wanted to use our deep research, which kind of will go and do a bunch of research on the web for me. So instead of just asking deep research directly, I went into ChatGPT and asked regular ChatGPT 5 to say, I want to write a prompt for deep research on how to do, how to best approach my draft. And here's my draft position, here are my rules, here's all this stuff. And I gave it a bunch of context. But instead of asking it to give me the answer, I asked it to help me write the prompt so I can do that. And what that does is it takes the implicit assumptions of the model of what I wanted, because I didn't give it context on maybe what I wanted the output to look like, what are these things, and it makes it explicit. So then it tells me, here's how I want the output. And I'd be like, oh, I actually agree with that. Or nope, I'm gonna edit that. That's not exactly what I wanted. So I can make that implicit assumptions explicit, edit it, and then feed it back to the model. So anyways, just a little tip that I gave around kind of how to interact. And I would encourage you all to start thinking about that meta use of ChatGPT.
That's great. I would even add one more, if I may, and that's creating a persona. So I'm a recruiter. I'm trying to recruit young folks into cleared careers who may not have considered it. And what kinds of points could I make to find these folks, or where should I be looking to find these folks? And actually, this really is a nice dovetail to this idea about making careers cool again. And, as we're thinking about all of the opportunities, right? We've talked a bit about opportunities. We've talked about changing skills demand and talking about the changing nature of work. And just the immense need that the national security has right now for folks with the ability to leverage AI skills, technical and non-technical. So as we're thinking about recruiting a new wave of folks into the cleared community, how can we make that case to folks, in your opinion? I'm interested in both of your opinions, because we really do need that top talent that's going to be in industry to help drive that innovation and R&D, but we also want them to be part of the mission set. So I'll ask next about building bridges, but how can we start thinking about making cleared careers cool again for young folks?
So I think we've talked about this at the Defense Innovation Organizations for 6 or 7 years, about this mission is cool and unique, and you can't actually see a lot of the things that defense does unless you're part of that ecosystem, right? You can be adjacent, you can be at Lockheed Martin or Raytheon and see it, but the coolest jobs in defense require the clearance, and you have to get through several gates. It's actually, the irony is the exclusivity of defense makes it both very appealing and also difficult for industry, difficult for new talent, right? It's like, be patient, the clearance is coming, right? And that's not something they're used to. I don't like generalizing about generations is kind of not a great thing to do, but I think there is a patience gap here. I think they're used to immediacy, especially if they pay for ChatGPT, right? It's like right away you get an answer. I was even thinking about the applicability of what Felipe was saying to wargaming, right? To make it cool, think about how you could get help with a board game you're playing at home, and then take that set of parameters, those constraints and those opportunities, and apply that to wargaming in a cleared version of ChatGPT that I'm sure is coming. So I think that's where you tell people, like, hey, you can see this far in front of you. If you want to see further, you're going to need the clearance, and that means you're going to have to take a cool job in this space. One other real quick thing is storytelling matters, right? So, and we tell scientists and small businesses this all the time, is you are changing the world with your thing that you made, and nobody understands it. So you can't change the world. So we need, as recruiters, as talent managers, people looking for talent in the private sector, if we can't explain why the job is cool and we don't understand your talent, like, there's a storytelling mismatch there too. So teaching people, you can use AI tools to help you with this, but teach people how to make their job more compelling. USA Jobs should take this advice. Position descriptions are a pretty big challenge in the Defense Department, and AI can help with that, exactly.
So I'll add 2 specific points on how to make these jobs cool again. The first is, I think these jobs are inherently cool and impactful, right? And that is part of the candidates we want, are people who are drawn to the mission, right? It's people who understand, right, whether it be the intelligence community or the Department of War or other jobs in the federal civilian space. A lot of people are in these jobs because they know the mission matters, right? And they understand, and there's some tie to that. And so I think there's, that's the type of candidates that we want in this space, and people who work in this space. Is the jobs themselves are pretty amazing, and like what we're doing and how we, I'll pick on my friends that support like the consumer packaged goods industry. It's like, and there's the famous quote by like Steve Jobs when he was recruiting, I forget who was like heading Coca-Cola, and he said, do you want to sell sugar water or do you want to change the world? Right? And so there's very much a focus on, I think we need to continue to emphasize that is the mission impact. The second piece is the way you get there is by making the fundamental tools available, right? So it's not cool if you go to the department today and it's like, great, I have ChatGPT in my personal life, and I go behind these cleared walls and I have this like third-rate technology that I'm like, what is this? I thought this was supposed to be the innovative place. And so that's part of the role of industry, and folks, where we're very focused on is how do we bring the fundamental building blocks and this technology to the government through programs like what DIU is doing, and through working with a lot of different leaders who are very focused on bringing this technology to the government. So making those fundamental building blocks is important. And the reason it's so important is because so much of the innovation is actually going to come from the bottoms up. And I'll share a quick story from the department. 2-3 years ago, they launched something called Task Force Lima, which was to figure out how should and that was out of the Chief Data and AI Office, how should generative AI be used within the department? And so they launched this Task Force Lima, and Captain Lugo, who ran it, put out a call and he said, who wants to use generative AI within the department? And one of the groups that raised their hands was the Army chaplains. So the priests of the military raised their hand and said, we want to use generative AI. And so he said, I'm going to take this meeting. And so he goes and he meets with the chaplains, and he sits down and he's like, all right, why do you want to use generative AI? And their answer was, we want it to write our sermons. And he leaned back and he laughed and he's like, isn't that a core part of your job? Isn't that what you do here? Why would you want AI to automate that task? And the response was, our job is to care for the mental health of our service members. The less time I spend writing sermons is more time I can spend one-on-one with the soldiers that need my help, and I would rather be doing that. I'll review the outputs, I'll prompt it right, but I want to be spending less time writing sermons and more time with the soldiers that need my help. And I love that story because it's so powerful, and it's such a ground-up story. Like, it's a bottoms-up innovation. No one in the Pentagon and CDAO is going to sit back and say, who needs generative AI access? And going to point out the chaplains to write sermons. That only came because you had someone within the Pentagon who knew that role, who understood what they had to do, and understood, because of their personal life, what AI could do, and said, let me bring this to this problem. And this bottoms-up innovation. So I think there are going to be so many opportunities like that now as AI gets unleashed within. And so I think this is the perfect opportunity for, especially in the cleared world, to bring people who know AI and who understand the concepts, again, in some cases just because they're a personal user and they use it for all these things in their personal life, to then think, all right, well, how could I apply that to my work here in the department and the mission I'm trying to add value to?
Just a quick follow-up. From Task Force Lima rose the AI Rapid Capability Cell within CDAO. And now to stay true to that word, let's bring Gen AI capabilities to the department in a way that is industry-driven, right? Commercial parity in the department, all of those opportunities, and the need to build bridges with companies large and small to help the warfighting mission. Can you share a little bit about that evolution in the sense of, we recently saw the news of a partnership with OpenAI and the department. Can you share a little bit about what you guys are up to?
Yeah, so it's been about 3-4 months now, but we were awarded a contract through the AI Rapid Capability Cell at CDAO the Chief Data and AI Office, to continue to work. And actually, I give the department a tremendous amount of credit. And there's some amazing folks serving. David Jin over there is incredible and is leading, and John Elliott, some other folks there. But they had amazing forethought, which was, we don't have all the answers. We don't know how generative AI, like actually Task Force Lima and other things taught us that we don't know exactly. But what we do realize that we need the fundamental capabilities to be available in the right access patterns, in like the right classified domains, and make this available. And so their thought process was work with OpenAI and the other frontier labs. So we're going to go work directly with the frontier labs, the people building these models, and issue contracts to say, help us work together to figure out how we should be using AI within the department. And so that's what we've been doing. We have a team that's been working directly with CDAO and with the specific mission areas to think through, and the services to think through what are the specific problems that we could be using AI for, and what are the challenges that we need to address, and how do we do that. So us, and then also they're also doing it with the other frontier AI labs, really thinking through how do we bring this technology to the department and making that investment.
That's really exciting. I have one more question for David, and then how are we on time, by the way?
I don't know what time we go till.
4 minutes. Okay, you know what? I will save a lightning round for the very end then, and just want to make sure, does anybody in the audience have a question they wanted to ask? We have someone here. Can you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Brittany. I'm with Andrew. What are your guys' feelings about candidates using ChatGPT in interviews?
So questions about ChatGPT, our feelings about candidates using ChatGPT in interview. I think there's a place where I absolutely want them to use it, and a place where I don't want them to use it. So I think preparing for an interview and kind of doing the research, I almost see it as table stakes. They should absolutely be using ChatGPT to interview. Live during an interview, as I'm asking a question, is a different story. That, I think I see it as a little bit more of, no, I'm trying to interact with you as a candidate and don't want to do that. So that's definitely my feeling, is just generally is like, how should we approach this? So table stakes for me is actually that they've used ChatGPT to prepare and understand. Clearly I work at OpenAI, and so we should even more so be using it. But live during an interview is not necessarily the place. That being said, one of the things we do in our interview process is we do a take-home exam. And we say, here's a take-home problem. I absolutely want them to be using ChatGPT for that. So they should absolutely be using it in that moment to do prep and do research. So I do think the world of interviewing is going. We've seen some evidence that, again, not something that we've done a lot directly, but I've read some articles about other large tech companies that have gone back to fully in-person interviews to mitigate that fact and actually say, nope, you need to actually come here because I want to make sure you're not using some AI tool in the background to answer my questions. It's also pretty obvious. People who try to use it, it's very easy to catch and a very quick flag of not something that you should be doing live during that moment. I will give actually another plug, though, slightly different, related to interviewing, which is one of my favorite use cases these days of AI is actually using AI for my interview debriefs myself. So I have a custom GPT, if you're familiar with kind of those, where I've uploaded like our interview guide, style guide, format, my thoughts on kind of how I want interview debriefs to go. During a live interview, I will just write my like raw notes. And so like a very haphazard notes that I still kind of just like type out. And then I copy and paste those into the custom GPT, and then I use the dictation to just summarize my thoughts. So I just basically say, all right, and I ramble for like 5-10 minutes on, okay, here's what I liked about the candidate, here's what I didn't like. Overall, I think I'm a yes, I think I'm a no. I might go back and forth with the model to like, all right, what do you think? Should I really go yes, no, and kind of use it as like a debate partner to help clarify my thoughts, and then ultimately like help it just like write out my thoughts in the right format. So that's, again, a power use that I use all the time, to the point of like tasks. We are hiring, and so I do a lot of interviews these days, and it used to take me a lot of time to do all my debrief notes. I'm normally like, I do an interview, and within 5 minutes, 10 minutes, I'm now like, I block another 10 minutes after my interview, just do like my straight notes after that, and I'm, debrief ready to go like right away.
That's awesome. And we didn't even get into we could have some on this topic. Any final questions before I give a quick lightning round? We have 1 minute. Okay, great. And the last, we have a question.
Sorry about that. So I had a question about what would you recommend?
Can you introduce yourself, please?
Oh, sure. Junius Courier with Maximus. So I had a question about what would you suggest as technologies or ways to use AI that would be beneficial to recruiters, talent management, or talent acquisition professionals?
Number one thing I would actually say is ask AI that question. Ask AI, how could you help me in my role and what I'm doing? So it'll actually probably give you a much better answer than I will, in terms because it will know much more of what that function is like. I would also encourage you to just push the boundaries. Like try things that you don't know if it will really work, and just like try it. Like, oh, maybe if I do this, will it help me summarize this or look for XYZ? So I would definitely use AI itself to help ask and like, how should I use AI? And that will be, I think, one of the big steps forward on how to actually approach it.
Awesome. Final thought. If you could make one recommendation for how we can start to change the narrative about making cleared careers cool again, what would it be and who would you direct it to?
This is, I think something we did last year when I was still with National Security Innovation Network under Defense Innovation Unit is we built a 3 time zone real-time kickoff for a Space Force AI challenge. And then it was a multi-month challenge where we had Guardians use, and actually airmen as well, use both the tools that were allowed from AFRL, from Air Force Research Lab, like Nipper GPT and Camo GPT, alongside on their personal computers. Like if I did the same unclass problem set on ChatGPT or on Perplexity, what would the differences be? And then we had the Guardians tell us, like, what are the most exciting things you could do if you had access to all of these? What are the approved tools not doing that you need them to do? I think more of those, that was public facing. We had a 3-star from the Space Force kick it off. We had AFRL there. The Guardians got to meet technologists who were pretty amazing and knew a lot about what's going on the forefront. I think more of these public facing opportunities where, like for instance, if all of you could open a computer right now and have Felipe guide you through a few of these prompts or whatever we want to call them, like I think it's what we need to be doing, all of us, right? And our kids are not going to learn how to do this if we don't let them test it out. So as much as we fear things and we're worried about security and safety, I think if you have kids or kids in your life, I think it's important for you to also guide them toward that.
Yeah, I'll say two recommendations. One to like the CIO shops is quickly accredit these tools. Find ways to get these tools in. That's the number one thing that you can do, is make the tools available. No one likes when they go into a job and have like second and third rate technology. So find ways to get these tools accredited. That'd be one recommendation. The other one is kind of to your point before, share stories, right? That's the most powerful way of, hey, so-and-so was able to do X, Y, Z with using this technology, and here's why that is so impactful to the mission. Here's why it's so motivating. Whether it be, in the civilian space, people at NIH using, ChatGPT to do basic fundamental research around, solving cancer, whether it be the CDC doing research on, how to present epidemics. So, and then, a lot more stories within the department and the intelligence community. So it's tough there. So sometimes, obviously the nature of cleared work, but finding the right public stories that you can share and tell and put people who are doing great things on a podium and let them share their stories about how they're using it. And that's how you'll motivate others.
That's great. Great recommendations from you both. Please join me in thanking our fantastic speakers today. Thank you so much.